Namaste. Good to see you all. Do you have some songs to offer to us?
Wiggle it.
I'm going to go up and get my computer while he's setting up.
Namaste. So I will sing this first song, which came from the Hindu epic Ramayana. So, which was originally written in Sanskrit, then it was translated into Hindi by the poet Tulsidas. So this song is Glory to Lord Rama, which is what Raman was centered on. And it's very difficult Hindi that is in here. It's classical Hindi that was written thousands of years ago. So here is what, with the help of AI, here is the translation I'm going to share with you. O my mind, praise the merciful Lord Ramachandra, who removes the intense fear of the cycle of birth and death, which is the material world. His eyes are like newly blossomed lotuses. His face is a lotus. His hands are like lotuses, and the soles of his feet are like crimson lotuses. And then the next paragraph says, his beauty surpasses that of countless Kamadevas, the god of love, and his body shines like a fresh dark blue rain cloud. His brilliant yellow garments look like a pure flash of lightning against his dark skin. I bow to the groom of Janaka's daughter, Sita. So Sita, as you may be aware, is Rama's partner. Next paragraph, praise the friend of the helpless, the sun that dispels darkness, and the destroyer of the lineage of demons and giants. He is the joy of the Raghu clan, the source of supreme bliss, the moon of the Kushala region, and the beloved son of King Dasaratha. Last paragraph, thus says Tulsidas the poet, he is the delight of Lord Shiva, the serpent king Shisha, and the minds of sages. O Lord, please reside in the lotus of my heart and destroy the dark forces of desire, anger, greed, and ego. reduce the volume a little bit so that the words are not overwhelmed. Chandra Kripalu Bhajaman Aranam Navadarulam Sri Ram Chandra Kripalu Bhajaman Aranam Navadarulam Navukanja Dochana Kanja Kanja Parakandarunam Navukanja Dochana Kanja Kanja Parakandarunam Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Kandarpa Aganita Amita Chavi Navanila Nirajvasundaram Kandarpa Aganita Amita Chavi Navanila Nirajvasundaram Patapita Manam Tarita Ruchi Suchi Navavijayata Sutaram Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Bhajadina Bandhu Dineshvara Daita Vanshani Kandalam Rajadina Bandhu Dineshvara Daita Vanshani Kandalam Raghunanda Ananda Kanda Karshan Kanda Dasharathanandanam Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Mukutta Kundala Tilakachava Udara Angavibhushanam Sira Mukutta Kundala Tilakachava Udara Angavibhushanam Ajana Bhajashara Chapadhara Sangram Nitaparadurshanam Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Sri Ram Iti Bhagati Tulasi Dasa Shankar Shisha Muni Manaranjanam Iti Bhagati Tulasi Dasa Shankar Shisha Muni Manaranjanam Mama Hridaya Anjali Vasutu Amadi Saranaya Vanjanam You probably noticed that this song is structured in a beat that is very unusual. It is only found in Indian music. Generally, Western music, the beats are all even numbered. But this is in odd number, seven counts. That's how it goes, 2, 2, 3. Right? So it's kind of a little difficult to kind of get your minds on this particular rhythm. I can sing another one. So, yeah, I was going to sing a devotional song by Rabindranath Tagore, which is in Bengali. And I think Mrs. Ghosh is here at the right time for this Bengali song.
I'm always at the right time.
She speaks Bengali. This is a song of total surrender to God. So the words go like this: ওই আসন তলে মাটির পরে লুটিয়ে রব তোমার চরণ ধুলায় ধুলায় ধূসর হব. So what it means, ashan is where we place our God, right? So this is the ashan. So to this ashan will be lutier rabo, means will be completely, what we call sashtang, meaning will be completely down worshipping. And in Hindu culture, it is customary to touch your elders or your respected person, to touch their feet with the goal of collecting some dust from their feet. So it says, Tomar charan dhulai dhulai dhushara hobo, means I will take the dust out of your feet and I will be dusty with that. Okay. So that is the notion of this. Okay, but it is a complete surrender. Says that I want to be at the very bottom of the list of your followers. There is this procession for you, I will be at the very end, so on and so forth. Right now, Rabindranath Tagore's songs are generally very philosophical as well as abstract, so they're not always very easy to translate word by word. Right? So it's the notion behind the song which encompasses the spirit. And by the way, this song is written in the style of what we call kirtan, meaning devotional style of Bengali songs. It also has folk tune mixed into it. Rabindranath Tagore spent much of his life in the rural areas of what is now Bangladesh, and he learned a good deal of what's called Baul philosophy of God, and he also learned the folk songs. So he wrote many songs that are the Baul philosophy as well as the Baul musical structure. So that's what this song is kind of based on.
Yeah, put the mic overloaded. Yeah, a little test. Now we can hear your voice. Yeah, otherwise it's probably.
ওই আসন তলে মাটির পরে লুটিয়ে রব ওই আসন তলে ওই আসন তলে তোমার চরণ ধুলায় ধুলায় ধূসর ভবন বইয়া আসন তলে বইয়া আসন তলে কেন আমায় মান দিয়ে আর দূরে রাখো কেন আমায় মান দিয়ে আর দূরে রাখো চিরজন ওহে চিরজন এমন করে ভুলিও না তো চিরজন এমন করে ভুলিও না তো অসম্মানে আনো টেনে পায়ে তব অসম্মানে আনো টেনে পায়ে তব তোমার চরণ ধুলায় ধুলায় ধূসর ভবন ওই আসন তলে ওই আসন তলে তোমার যাত্রী দলে রব পিছে স্থান দিও হে আমায় স্থান দিও হে আমায় তুমি সবার নিচে আমি তোমার যাত্রী দলে রব পিছে স্থান দিও হে আমায় স্থান দিও হে আমায় তুমি সবার নিচে প্রসাদ লাগি কতই লোকে আসে কে প্রসাদ লাগি কতই লোকে আসে কে আমি কিছু ওহে আমি কিছু চাইব না তো রইব সবার শেষে যা বাকি রয় তাহাই লব সবার শেষে যা বাকি রয় তাহাই লব তোমার চরণ ধুলায় ধুলায় ধূসর ভবন ওই আসন তলে ওই আসন তলে মাটির পরে লুচিয়ে রব ওই আসন তলে ওই আসন তলে ওই আসন তলে ওই আসন তলে Do we have time for it? I think it's 7 now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was wonderful. Really beautiful.
Nice selections.
Maybe you could hear your voice, or they can see. Is that okay, Swami? Or do you want it back further?
A song. You're going to be short a couple. So
We can share.
you'll have to share. Let's see if the volume's going to be.
I guess I'll have one.
Do we have enough there?
You're sharing.
Om Sana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunatu Sahaviram Sarvabhavu Tejasvinavadi Tamastri Bhavit Vishabhai Om Shanti Shanti. May God protect us, may He guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Oh, peace, peace, peace. So, nice to see you all. So, as the song said, we're going to try to learn from stories today, and specifically fairy tales. And fairy tales really didn't have anything to do with the little wispy winged things that fly around. Fairy, in this context, simply means mysterious or magical. And so they're magical tales. And to start off, I'm going to read a fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm. And it has to do with kindness, magical assistance, and the triumph of the youngest one of three, which is a rather typical scenario for fairy tales. There are often, there are lots of threes, and apparently it's a storytelling gimmick, you could say, or that they use because it's easier to remember things if they come in threes, and it gives you some comparisons and so forth. So a lot of stories have things that come in threes. All right, this one is probably not too familiar. It's called The Queen Bee. Anybody heard the fairy tale, The Queen Bee? Okay. It's a tale. I'll get to the actual story. This king had 3 sons, and the older 2 went out in search of adventures, but they just fell into a wild and disorderly way of living, so that they never came home again. The youngest, who was called Simpleton, set out to seek his brothers, but when at length he found them, they all mocked him for thinking that he, with his simplicity, could get through the world, when the 2 of them could not make their way, and yet were so much cleverer than he was. But all 3 then traveled away together and came to an anthill. The 2 elder brothers wanted to destroy it, to see the little ants creeping about in their terror and carrying their eggs away. But the simpleton said, "Oh, no, let's just leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to disturb them." Then they went on, and they came to a lake on which there were a great number of ducks swimming. The 2 brothers wanted to catch a couple and roast them, but the simpleton said, "No, let's don't do that. Let's leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to kill them." And at length they came to a bee's nest, in which there was much honey that ran out on the trunk of the tree. The 2 wanted to make a fire beneath the tree to suffocate the bees in order that they could take the honey away. But again, the simpleton stopped and said, no, let's leave the creatures in peace. Let's don't burn them. At length, the 3 brothers arrived at a big castle with stone horses standing in the stables. And at first, there didn't seem to be any human beings in sight. And they went through all the halls until quite at the end, they came to a little door where there were 3 locks. In the middle of the door, there was a tiny window, and they peered through the window, and they saw a little gray man sitting in a chair. They called him once, called him again, called him a 3rd time, and at last he came out and opened the locks. He said nothing, but he conducted them into a handsomely spread table. When they had eaten and drunk their fill, they came to bedrooms, and each one had its own little bedroom, and the little gray man left them for the evening. The next morning, the little gray man came to the eldest and beckoned him and conducted him to a stone table on which was inscribed 3 tasks, by the performance of which the castle could be delivered from a spell that it was under. The first task was that in the forest beneath the moss lay the princess's pearls, 1,000 in number, which must be picked up, and if by sunset one single pearl was wanting, he who had looked for them would be turned into stone, which had been the fate of virtually everything in this castle. Well, the eldest went thither and sought the whole day, but when it came to the end, he had only found about 100. And what was written on the table came to pass, and he was turned to stone. The next day, the 2nd brother undertook the same adventure, and he did not fare much better. He was able to find about 200 pearls, and unfortunately, he then, of course, was changed to stone. At last, the simpleton's turn came, and he went forth, and he found it very hard to find any pearls at all. And he finally seated himself on the stone and wept. And while he was sitting, the king of the ants, whose life he had saved, came with 5,000 ants. And before long, the little creatures had gotten all the pearls together and laid them in a heap. The second task, however, was to fetch a key at the bottom of the lake. This was the key to the chamber, the bedchamber of the king's daughter. When the simpleton came to the lake, the ducks, which he had saved, swam up to him and dived down and brought the key out of the water. The third task was even more difficult. There were 3 daughters of the king sleeping. The youngest and dearest to him, who was to inherit the throne, had to be sought out. Now, it turns out that each one, before they had been put to sleep, had eaten a different kind of sweetmeat. The eldest a bit of sugar, the second a little syrup, and the youngest a spoonful of honey. So the queen bee, which Simpleton had protected from the fire, came and tasted the lips of all three, and at last she remained sitting on the mouth which had eaten the honey. And thus the king's son recognized the right princess. Then the enchantment was at an end. Everything was released from sleep and from stone, and they once more returned to their natural forms. The simpleton married the youngest and sweetest princess, and after her father's death became the king, while the other two brothers received the other two sisters. So this is a fairy tale because, first of all, it has a magical element. We have this castle and all of its inhabitants turn either put asleep or turn to stone. There are three tasks which seem rather impossible, and there's help from the natural world, the little elements of the natural world, the three different kinds of creatures. And we can find that the queen bee, after which this fairy tale is named, has a lot of discrimination. She can discriminate between the honey and other forms of sweets. So it's a kind of symbolic act of discernment. And this mirrors the spiritual archetypes of the wise guide, the life-giving knowledge from this spiritual guide. We also see that humility and selflessness are virtues. The youngest brother, he just sat and wept for help, which is what we're supposed to do in our spiritual life. We're supposed to weep to the Lord, to have him help us and bring his mercy on us. In contrast, the other two brothers were greedy, kind of cruel, and really not interested in developing morally. So they were disconnected from the natural world. So we see that this promotes interdependence with the natural world and being able to cry for help when one needs it, and to have faith that somehow you will be helped and then everything will be set right. And the marriage of the simpleton and the princess represents a union of the masculine and feminine elements, which is considered necessary for our spiritual development, that our masculine and feminine halves be united, and that we realize that we have both genders and transcend gender in our true spiritual essence. So, the eldest brother represented a selfish, destructive self. In fairy tales, you can read the different characters as being elements of ourselves. So any part of ourself that tends to be selfish or disruptive, that was represented by the eldest brother. In Jungian terms, it represents part of our shadow self. It doesn't have a regard for natural order. Then the second brother represents entitlement, a competitive self, an entitlement without humility or cooperation. And of course, this also leads to failure. And the youngest brother represents the humble, coherent self, the cooperative self, the one that recognizes the necessity of being in harmony with the natural worlds. His success in the tasks, of course, were brought about by his protecting the natural creatures that they had encountered, which then came to his aid. All right, so we could say that collecting the pearls represents collecting humility and perseverance, fetching the key, cooperation and trust, and identifying the youngest princess as discernment of truth and virtue. So we see that in fairy tales, it's very common that the characters are not named, they're not Mary and Jack and Jones and that sort of thing. They have generic names. So it's the simpleton and the eldest brother and so forth, and the little gray man and the princess. So if there is a name, it's usually indicative of some characteristic, like Cinderella lived among the cinders. So that's one common characteristic of most fairy tales. As we said, fairy simply means magical. And fairy tales represent unusual and improbable events, but they're presented as ordinary, things that might happen to anybody. And so they're symbolic of our personal quest. It has the goal of achieving a higher personality, a development of character, and a wider consciousness so that we can eventually approach our spiritual wholeness. So it often represents a battle to achieve our self-realization, and the nice thing is it always guarantees a happy ending. Unlike many myths that are tragic, or fables that are moralistic, the fairy tales always have a happy ending. And the fact that they start out with once upon a time and end with live happily ever after indicates that they're really timeless, that they're not really things that are supposed to happen in regular space and time, but they're happening in interior space and time, and ultimately in that space the space and time which is really beyond space and time. And so they answer eternal questions. How am I supposed to live my life? And how can I truly be myself and still achieve the goal? And so fairy tales are suggestive of solutions to these problems. It's interesting that really the origin of fairy tales is undateable. Probably the earliest recordings of things that we would call fairy tales are the Indian Panchatantra, the Arabian tales, and the Egyptian fairy tales. And we also find that there are relatively few themes. They're relatively few in numbers, and they're pretty universal. You find similar kinds of stories all over the world, with simply the context of the culture and the times differing. So the ones from Grimm's fairy tale have a European feel, but if you're reading the Indian Panchatantra, the setting will be more of an Indian context. And same thing with Arabian tales or Egyptian tales or whatever part of the world you're looking at for fairy tales. They're going to have some cultural differences for the exterior things, but the essential parts are going to be the same. So it seems that these fairy tales are symbolic expressions of some deep philosophical realizations that people have had all over the world. They are teaching some mystical truths and deep truths about the nature of ourselves, of some transcendent being, and the world. The famous psychologist, Dr. Carl Jung, said that it is in fairy tales that one can best study the comparative anatomy of the psyche. And it's interesting to know that in India, physicians would often prescribe the contemplation of a particular fairy tale to someone that had a psychological difficulty. And so they would pick a fairy tale that was appropriate to their particular problem and ask them to meditate on it and find out a solution for themselves. Solzhenitsyn, the Nobel Prize winner, in his speech said that some things lead into realms beyond words. It is like the small mirror in fairy tales. You glance in it, and what you see is not your little self. For an instant, you glimpse the inaccessible, and the soul cries out for it. They help us connect to that mysterious part of who we are. Excuse me. And Schuller, the author of William Tell, said, deeper meaning resides in fairy tales told to me in my childhood than in any truth that is taught in life. And Einstein said, if you want your children to be smart, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be even smarter, read them more fairy tales. So just think how smart you're going to get here. Now, both Freud, who was Jung's original teacher, and Jung thought highly of fairy tales as psychoanalytical tools. And they seem to help us create or to accept the problematical nature of life. Life is full of struggles, and we need to learn to struggle courageously against what seems overwhelming odds and succeed in bringing some existence or meaning out of this existence. So it seems that the exact message of a fairy tale is that there's a struggle against severe difficulties in life, and these are unavoidable, an intrinsic part of life, and that we could expect hardships, but if we can master all of these and have faith in ourselves and in the natural world, we can see our ways through it. And it's often the ones that are thought of as the meekest or the simplest or not so bright ones that seem to succeed in that they are, as the Bible said, blessed are the meek, or as Vivekananda said, in the hope lies in you, the meek and the lowly, but the faithful. Have faith in the Lord. And of course, also he emphasized having faith in yourself. And again, Carl Jung said that the basic pattern of development that unfolds and actualizes people's inner self through human consciousness is illuminated by fairy tales. Fairy tales can further illuminate and validate formulations derived from clinical observations. So he saw this as an important part of the individuation process. We also see the role of evil in life. We often wonder why is there evil in life if God is all good and powerful? Why didn't he just eliminate it in the beginning? Well, it's because they're there to force us to confront difficult situations and to help us lift ourselves out of these difficulties which occur in the personal realm and put us in a more universal realm to encounter our spiritual essence. So an important function of fairy tales is to enable us to identify and enter into what Jung and Freud would have called archetypal situations and experiences, such as the conflict of good versus evil, courage versus cowardice, and putting our wits against these what seem like superior forces. And this identification and participation helps to eliminate the feelings of isolation and loneliness to which often people us human beings are prone. It makes us feel more of a part of a greater whole. It helps us to cope with the natural world, both the natural evils in the world, and to utilize the natural help that comes from the world. Now, there's no one right way of interpreting fairy tales. Again, as I mentioned last month, they're kind of a Rorschach ink blot type situation where people will see into them what they need to see and what their psyche is ready for. We're all on a spiritual path and journey, but we're not all necessarily starting from exactly the same place. And we don't have exactly the same kinds of tools in our tool basket. So we each come to a fairy tale with its own meaning. So what I'm going to say are sort of generalized ideas about the symbolism in fairy tales to give you a little bit of an idea of how one might think about them, but it's not necessarily the only way to think about them. Now, in order to get points across in fairy tales, the characters are often symbolized in rather extreme or polarity terms, like the stupid one versus the clever one, the beautiful one versus the ugly one, the good one versus the bad one. And again, these can be thought of as different parts of ourselves. We all have various aspects to ourselves. Sometimes we might feel stupid, sometimes we might feel clever. So these can be thought of as parts of ourselves. So let's take another example of a fairy tale, and then talk about some of the symbolism that we might find in it. This is Hansel and Gretel. Now, some of you might have read the actual story, or you might have seen the opera. The opera makes a few changes, as any storyteller does when they put it on the screen or in the form of a play or a musical. They take shortcuts, they shorten the plot a bit, leave certain things out, maybe add another element here and there. And so I'll be talking mostly about what is in the original story version rather than the opera version, but occasionally commenting on some of the changes that were made there. So it starts out that the Hansel and Gretel are brother and sister, but their original mother dies. Now, this is a very familiar theme in fairy tales, and it's because the mother aspects in these stories represent aspects of the Divine Mother. And so the real mother stands for the spiritual and sattvic aspect of the Divine Mother that will be helping us in our spiritual path, whereas the stepmother represents the more tamasic aspect of the Divine Mother that tends to not want us to succeed in spiritual life. The mother that deludes us with the world and brings all sorts of pleasures and pains and obstacles in our path and causes us to forget our true nature rather than trying to seek our true nature. The father figure, and frequently father figures represent that more transcendent element in our spiritual life, perhaps a guru figure or the Brahman, the infinite, undivided, unchanging, or some sort of transcendent masculine spiritual element. And in some sense, the ultimate source of sustenance. So the family is very, very poor. And the stepmother is worried that they're not even going to be able to feed themselves, much less their two children. Now, being a stepmother, she's not terribly attached to these two children. In fact, she sees them as kind of a burden. And so when they're just about to starve, she suggests to the husband, let's just take them out in the woods and we just never go back for them. We'll just leave them out there. That way we'll have enough for ourselves. But father, of course, doesn't like this idea, but he seems to finally give in to the constant pleas of this stepmother. And so he reluctantly takes them out into the forest. But the kids have overheard this. And so Hansel, the boy, figures out a way to get home. He finds all these shiny little stones, and so he drops one every once in a while so that they'll be able to find their way back in the moonlight. So you see, sometimes we're reluctant to leave the comforts of the ordinary worldly life, and so we try to get our way back home. So the first time this happens, they do indeed get back to the house. The second time, however, I've forgotten why they can't use the stones, but there's some reason they have to use the breadcrumbs. Oh, I think they've locked the house so they can't get out. So he can't get the stones. So he has to take the last little piece of bread that they were given for supper. He hides it in his pocket and he spreads the breadcrumbs on the path. But unfortunately, the birds eat it and prevent them from getting home. So they are now lost in the forest. So the birds, in some sense, are forcing them to confront their unconscious aspects, which is represented by the forest. This is a typical thing that you find in fairy tales. You'll find that the characters find themselves in a dark forest, and it represents having to confront the darker parts of themselves. So they wander around trying to find something that looks familiar, and they finally find this enchanting little house that's made out of gingerbread and candy and cakes and all sorts of good things to eat. And they are hungry because they use the bread they had given to supper to scatter on the ground. And so they have had nothing to eat. So they are very pleased to find this enchanting little house, and they start to nibble at all the little goodies. Then this voice comes in from the inside and says, "Who's nibbling at my house?" And so she finally comes out. It turns out she's a witch, but they don't know this at first. And she has enchanted all sorts of children into her little house by her house of sense pleasures, you could say. And then she bakes them into all these goodies and creates her house out of them. So the witch is the embodiment of the delusion of the world and the lure of sense pleasures. And she completely dominates these poor little kids with her gingerbread house. Well, she gives them a comfortable place to sleep and a nice meal. And then she takes Hansel and puts him in a cage and makes Gretel do all the hard work of the house. And her plan is to fatten Hansel up to make him really plump and good to eat, and have eventually cook Gretel as well. But in the process, she wants Gretel to do all the work and fatten Hansel up. So they know her tactics. So Gretel gives Hansel a chicken bone. So when she comes to check out how fat he's gotten, he sticks out what's supposed to be his finger, but it's really a chicken bone. And the witch says, "Oh, you're not fat enough yet." She's very hard of seeing. Her vision's not very good. So one day the witch finally says, "Well, this is enough. We've waited long enough. He's just going to have to do the way he is. So we're going to let the fire in the oven and cook him up." And so she makes Gretel tend this fire, and she wants Gretel to look in the oven and see if it's ready for baking. And Gretel has gotten onto her and says, I'm not quite sure. Can you show me how I should check this out? And so the witch says, "Oh, it's so simple. Oh, you're such a stupid little girl. You just stick your head in like this." And then when she does that, Gretel pushes her into the oven and slams the door shut. And so now the wicked witch has been sort of turned on, that her tactics have been turned upon herself. So this is what we need to do with Maya. If we're attracted to something, we need to turn that attraction around into a spiritual discipline. If we really want to have a particular occupation, then we turn that into some sort of spiritual discipline. If it's some sort of service occupation, we remember that we're serving the Lord embodied in the persons. Or if we like to create things, then we create things for a spiritual person. It might be spiritual music, spiritual artwork, spiritual stories, perhaps spiritual claws for the altar, whatever it is that you're good at. So you take your talents and your propensities and turn them into a spiritual practice. So in the book, the house, when the witch is burnt, and which you could say she's burnt in the fire of discrimination, then the house turns into jewels and pearls. In the opera, all the children are released from the spell. They've been cooked into these gingerbreads, and they've all been liberated. So this act of killing the tamasic aspect of Maya has liberated all these children. So in the book, they take the jewels and they want to take them back to their father, but how to get back is the problem. They're pretty lost. And so they start wandering around and looking for help, and birds come to their aid. So just as the birds forced them into their dark forest to learn the lessons they needed to learn, now they're going to help them get back to their home. And their home is now, of course, the father. The stepmother has died. I don't know whether she died of starvation or what, but she died. And so they're basically going back to the spiritual father. And so they are going to take all the pearls and jewels that they found back to the father, dedicating all of their fruits of their labors to God, you could say. And so they take these home and live happily ever after with their father, which really represents living happily ever after in heaven. All right, so now we can look at Cinderella. Cinderella has been studied by a lot of people that are interested in fairy tales. One person reported finding 340 versions all over the world, and another person found 700 versions all over the world. So they come from Gnostic traditions, Egyptian traditions, Sumerian traditions, Indian traditions. All of these different traditions have some version of a young girl who is forced to live in the ashes of the hearth and having to work hard for a stepmother and stepsisters, a familiar theme. So in this one, again, her real mother has passed away, and her grave is not too far from the little house that they live in. The father remarries this woman who already has, in the Indian version, it's one daughter. In other versions, it's two daughters. And so these three are somewhat mean-spirited, and the father goes on a lot of business trips. And so while he's gone, they treat Cinderella very badly. They force her to sleep among the ashes on the hearth and ask her to do all the chores so they don't have to do a thing. So again, this having to sleep among the ashes at the hearth means that she is at the hearth of the stove, the oven, the place where the fire is burning. And this symbolizes the place where transformation can take place. And the work she has to do is the work that we have to do in the world, our unpleasant tasks sometimes that we have to do in the world in order for our spirit to evolve. So on one of these trips, when the father is just about to leave on another business trip, he asks the three daughters what they would like him to bring back. And of course, the two stepsisters want beautiful things like jewels and pearls and beautiful gowns. But Cinderella just asks for a twig of a tree that might hit his head on his way home. Now, the tree is another ancient symbol for things that connect us to the heavens. So trees connect the earth to the heavens. Trees are very common symbols in spiritual literature as well as in fairy tales. And the fact that it hits his head, it's hitting his crown chakra. So she wants a tree that's going to connect her to the spiritual realm. So when he gets home, she puts the twig into the soil around the mother's grave, and it grows into a beautiful wish-fulfilling tree. And so she frequently goes out and waters the tree with her tears. Again, we're supposed to cry for the Lord in our spiritual practice. So the tree grows, and when she goes and cries to the tree about her plight, she's frequently given gifts from the tree that she needs. And so this goes on quite some time. Then a great announcement in the kingdom goes forth that the prince is looking for a wife to marry, and so he's going to hold a grand ball. And of course, the stepmother wants her two daughters to go, and so they're all planning to go, but Cinderella would like to go as well. But you can't go. You don't have anything to wear, and you need to do all these chores. And so she cries to the mother, and it turns out that she somehow, the stepmother, after all of Cinderella's pleading, decides, well, I know what I'll do. I'll give her a task that's practically impossible. And so she won't be able to do it. And so that will be the condition of her going to the ball. So she throws a bunch of lentils into the ashes on the hearth and says, all right, if you really want to go, see if you can separate all these ashes and the lentils and bring all the lentils separately. So Cinderella's wondering how she's going to do this. But again, she goes to the mother, and the mother convinces parts of nature, the birds again, and the little animals, to scurry around the ashes and get all of the lentils separated. So again, these forces of nature come to Cinderella's aid. So she's done the task, and she presents this to the stepmother, who is a bit aghast that her plan has not worked. But she says, well, I guess you can go, but you don't have anything to wear, so I don't know what you're going to do. And they just take off. They go off to the ball. Now, again, there are 3 balls. A lot of the shortened versions that you see on TV, the cartoons, or the various versions that have been presented, usually just have 1 ball, but in the original it's 3. As we mentioned, it's a storytelling device. And she dances with the prince, and the prince is absolutely captivated with Cinderella. Now, I don't think the stepsisters and the mother even recognize Cinderella. They have no idea how she got there or where she got her gown. Well, she got it from her real mother, who again answered her prayers for a beautiful gown so that she could go to these 3 balls. So the prince doesn't want to dance with anybody else but this mysterious lady who has shown up, and he doesn't know where she's from or who she is. And so on the 3rd night, she disappears every night just before midnight, because the magic of the gown will disappear after midnight. So the prince is getting desperate to find out who she is, and so he spreads tar on the steps of the palace so that when she leaves, her shoes will get stuck in it. Actually, I think he's hoping she'll get stuck in it, but actually it's just one shoe. One shoe gets stuck in the tar, and so now he's got his only clue as to how he's going to find the love of his life. So he sends his courtiers out, and he in the original book, he goes with them and to door to find the person whose foot fits into this slipper. And now the evil stepsisters are so anxious to be the one that one of them, the eldest one, cuts off her toes so that the shoe will fit. And so the shoe seems to fit, and they ride off in the chariot of the cart of the prince, and the little birds whisper into the prince's ear, haven't you noticed the blood gushing out of her shoe? She's not the real princess. And so he takes her back and continues his search. And the second one cuts off her heel so that the shoe will fit. And so again, the prince rides off, and again the birds say, you got the wrong one. Look at her foot, it's bleeding. So he goes back, and of course, finally Cinderella gets a chance to try on the slipper, and it fits perfectly. And so they live happily ever after. So again, this union of the male and the female aspects within ourselves, transcending opposites and coming to spiritual oneness, we find that Cinderella has achieved this, the spiritual goal. All right, so The next one, the Cinderella is, of course, familiar to almost everybody because it's been dramatized and put in cartoons and everything else so many times that we're all pretty familiar with that story. But here's another one that's not so familiar and has some peculiar elements in it. It's called The Goose Girl. Anybody have ever heard about the Goose Girl? Okay. Well, in this one, a queen sends her daughter to be married to a prince in another kingdom. Apparently this was arranged a long time ago. But she, of course, is sad to send her off. But she gives her three things. She gives her a gold cup to drink from, and a talking horse called Falada to ride, and a maidservant with another horse to accompany her, and a white handkerchief with 3 drops of her own blood. It's interesting that in Snow White, there are also an element of 3 drops of blood indicating the 3 mysteries of the feminine, and also the union of the masculine and feminine in the white and red. The white handkerchief with the 3 red drops is an indication of the union of the feminine and masculine principles. And of course, the feminine principle is the manifest world, which is the 3 gunas. So 3 fits in there as well. So we could say it represents the background of Purusha, the white background, and the 3 gunas in a manifested universe. So as they go along, the princess is suddenly overcome with an enormous thirst. She is very thirsty and she wants to get some water from a stream. So she asks her maidservant if she would go and fetch some water for her in her cup. The maidservant just refuses. She's not going to do it. Well, she's not in the palace where the queen's in charge, and she doesn't know how to force her own will upon her maidservant. So she leans down on the stream, and a whisper is heard from the handkerchief. Oh, how your mother would grieve if she would see you now. So again, our spiritual mother is looking out for us, and she wants us to achieve the goal. But she is not doing well. She is succumbing to the world where she has to do ordinary things for herself. So this happens 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the white cloth with 3 drops of blood is lost in the stream. And for some reason, this represented her power. And the maidservant now knows that she is powerless and she can do whatever she wants and tell the real princess to obey her. So she forces her to switch places. She switches horses with her, she switches clothes with her, and she is going to pretend to be the princess and marry the prince, and she is going to have to pretend to be the maid, and she is sworn on her life that she will never reveal this to a living soul. So they arrive at the palace, and the prince marries the wrong person, and but the king is rather curious. What this other lady seems a little different, doesn't seem quite like the type you would expect to be the maid. So he sends her out and assigns her to tend some geese with a lad named Conrad. Now, this is the process of our getting grounded. It's equivalent to being lost in the forest. That's in this case, it's going out into the natural world and learning the lessons we have to learn in negotiating things in the real world, you could say. Now, the false princess fears that this horse will talk, and so she orders him decapitated. Well, that doesn't help much. The horse still talks. The goose girl princess pays the executioner to nail the head of the horse at the gate between the palace and the fields where she tends the geese. So this represents the junction between the patriarchal and the matriarchal. The patriarchal is the castle and the matriarchal is the field of the natural world. And again, these 3 times that things happen have a kind of ritualistic element to them. So every time she returns to the field and attends the geese, the head of the horse again talks to her and says, "Oh, your mother would be so disappointed to see you now." But as she enters the field of Mother Nature and her geese, she becomes somewhat empowered, and she has the ability to control the spirits, like the wind. Now, you could say the horse symbolizes the instinctual energy within us, and that's within us, and it's sort of like our ego is riding our instinctual energy, and so it keeps tugging us to realize our true self. So when she arrives every day to attend the geese, she takes time to comb her hair. That's symbolic of trying to straighten out her thoughts. So she removes her hat, which reveals long golden hair. Now, Conrad is just absolutely infatuated with this. She's gorgeous when she lets her hair down, and he wants to control her. And symbolically, that is to gain a strand of her hair. That will give him some control over her. Well, the goose girl doesn't want this, so she invokes the wind to blow Conrad's hat all over the place so that he has to chase after it. And by the time he's gotten his hat, it's given her time to comb her hair and put her hat back on. So Conrad tries to steal her hat several times, and he's unable to do this. So eventually, Conrad, who has overheard her conversations with the talking head of the horse, is beginning to get frustrated in getting her hair. And so he reports his strange occurrences to the king. So the king eavesdrops on the princess and witnesses the same scene about the hair and the hat and so forth. And so again, he realizes this is no ordinary maid servant. She's got control of the wind. So, and she's resisting this very charming young man, Conrad. So he summons the goose girl and asks her to explain what is exactly wrong. What is your story? She says, well, I've been sworn to secrecy to save my life, that I would not tell a soul. So the king said, well, then tell your troubles to the stove. And so again, we have this element of transformation in the stove, the fire of discrimination and renunciation and sending messages to the heavens and so forth. So the king represents the heavenly father, and so she's got to send the message to the stove. Well, the king listens through the stovepipe on the other side of the wall, hears the whole thing, and returns and tells her, well, I have overheard everything, and I will set things right. So the transcendent principle eventually sets things right. So he dresses the goose girl in gorgeous gowns so that nobody recognizes her. And at the banquet, the king tells the story that exactly parallels the situation which has occurred between the goose girl and the false princess. And then he turns to the false princess and says, what kind of punishment do you think such a wicked person should have? And she says, now, this is a grim fairy tale, not just because their name was grim, but it's pretty grim. Well, I think she should be put in a barrel with spikes driven in from all sides. Then horses should drag the barrel around the palace courtyard until she's dead. And so the king says, well, you have just pronounced your own sentence. So that's a karmic comeuppance. So the death of this evil character really represents the eliminations of our lower tendencies, that the evil parts of our nature that are preventing us from our realizing our true self have been destroyed. Much like Mother Kali has this terrible aspect where she's got this sword and she's chopping off heads and so forth. She's chopping off our ego, which is the part of our nature which is standing in the way of our true nature. So he finally accepts the true princess. And so again, we have the prince and the princess, representing our two halves of ourselves, which need to be united so that we can identify with our true nature, our transcendent oneness. All right, maybe we have time for Snow White as well, and we're going to see all these same elements. Guess what? She has a stepmother who doesn't like her. Why? Because, well, her real mother, first of all, we should go back to that. Her real mother prayed for a daughter that had skin as white as snow, hair as black as ebony, and lips as red as rubies or blood. And so Snow White is born, and she's indeed quite beautiful, but she's not that beautiful as a baby or a young girl. But as she matures, her beauty really blossoms. Now, her real mother dies, and she has a stepmother who is very vain. Okay, again, she represents the ego, which is the thing that is in the way of our spiritual progress. So she has this magic mirror, and the mirror represents the reflection of ourselves in some sense. We're looking at ourselves and looking at both the good and bad parts of ourselves. So this magical mirror is asked over and over again because she's so vain. She wants to make sure that she's still beautiful. And she says, who is the fairest one of all in this land? And the mirror usually says that you are, you're just lovely. But as Snow White matures and gets more and more beautiful, one day the mirror says, well, Snow White is now the fairest of them all. And she's horrified. She's so angry. And she has to plot to get rid of Snow White so she can be the most beautiful. Well, she's getting older and older, and Snow White's getting more beautiful and beautiful. This is a losing battle here. But so she plots to have Snow White murdered. She asks the huntsman to take her out and kill her. Well, the huntsman takes her out, but he cannot bring himself to kill this poor innocent little girl. He realizes that this stepmother's just being mean, and so he just lets her out into the forest. So here we are again. Our main character is left in the forest, just like Hansel and Gretel was left in the forest, and the three brothers had to find their way through the forest. So she finds a little house, and the little house has a table with 7 little place settings. There's 7 little cups, 7 little plates, and so forth. And she sees 7 little beds. And finally, the people that live in the house are 7 dwarves, and they come in and find her there. And she tells them her story, and she says, well, you can stay with us, but you have to work. You're going to have to do all of our chores. Well, now, Disney aside, these dwarfs do not have names, and they're symbolic of our 7 chakras. And our 7 chakras are our spiritual storehouse of energy, and we need to cleanse our 7 chakras in order that the energies of the Ida and Pingala can combine and make their way up the Sushumna to our crown chakra to enlighten us. So she works for the 7 dwarves, and the mirror tells the evil stepmother that Snow White was never killed. She still lives with these 7 dwarves. So she disguises herself, and again, a lot of these movie versions simplify the story down to 1, but she goes out 3 times to try to do her in. First, she takes a bodice that has laces around it, and she tightens it so tight, don't grab anymore. And she leaves, and she's suffocating, but the dwarfs come back and release her from her tight bodice. Well, this is the ego trying to snuff out our vital prana. And but the dwarves, our 7 chakras, liberate us from that peril. Then she brings a poisoned comb. Again, the comb and combing your hair represents our thoughts, So trying to put in evil thoughts into the brain is what the lower part of our nature often does. And again, the dwarves are able to rescue her from this peril. And then she brings a poison apple. And to this, she succumbs and she goes into a long sleep. They put her in a glass coffin. And eventually, Prince comes by and sees this beautiful young lady in this coffin and gives her a divine kiss. And she is awakened from her sleep and they get married and live happily ever after. Again, representing the union of the feminine and masculine, or the union of the Ida and Pingala, so that the spiritual realization can manifest. So, as we see, all of these fairy tales have a very spiritual message to us, which is go through life with being kind to Mother Nature and trying to solve the problems of life in the most holistic way possible, and having faith that the spiritual nature, the transcendent nature, will come to your aid and that you will achieve the goal. So that is the message of fairy tales. I'll end with a chant and then we can offer some flowers. Om Purnamata Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Oh, peace, peace, peace.
And maybe I can just give the schedule for
Yes.
coming attracting this sort of pandemic. First of all, thank you so much, Swami, for coming, as you do every month. We really wouldn't exist without you for all your years of coming here. So this week, this month is a little bit of a strange one. I can take care of it. Because it's coming into the summertime, and I've got a little bit of a travel schedule in June. Sunday the 7th, which is coming up this Sunday, we will have a puja and we will have a talk. The 14th, however, I'm out of town, and I believe the 21st also, and the 28th. Although the 21st I am. Yeah, the 21st I am back, but so here's the rub. So the 12th I go to Dallas for the retreat with Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, and we're making our petition to him to schedule him to come to Las Vegas. So he'll have information about everything after that, and Swami's agreed to come with a loc, depending on the schedule, and take part of this, and so it could be a very big, kind of nice event for us all. So the 14th, I'm not here for sure. The 24th, we'll see, because I'm coming back kind of late. So we'll see if we can at least do a puja for you guys. But I don't think you guys are here for the
But I'll be on the 14th.
21st.
And the 21st.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's your
It
big
was
day.
the 28th, that was the question mark.
The 28th, and the 28th we may just have, and I will be out of town the 28th, so we may have a puja with the ladies to do it for us. Thank you very much. And I know maybe you can do a small puja or a little arti or something like that when everybody's gone. It's just for sure going to be on the 21st or the 14th. So we've got a little bit of a schedule situation. So for sure, next week, 7th, we will have a class talk, and we'll have a puja, a full puja. The 14th, I'm out of town, and so are you guys. So then maybe we'll just have a small arti. The 21st, I am out of town, or I'm just barely back. 28th, we're gone as well. So for sure the 7th. So why don't we just save those of you guys, because we have some people online that are new and wanted to know what the next event was gonna be, so we'll say the 7th for sure, and then we'll,
Of July,
of June.
of June.
June.
Yes.
And I'll be back in July.
Yeah, Swami's back on the first, is it the first you wanna be here or the 8th of July?
Probably the first, yes.
First, okay. So Swamiji will be here July 1st, which is exciting. So, and then we'll have some other announcements. We're in discussions with some different Swamijis, maybe Swami Dhyana Yoganandaji and a few others are thinking about coming. So we're gonna try to bring you some excitement. So thank you all so much for helping us and coming, and thank you, Maharaj, for all of them. You guys can certainly add some flowers, and you guys at home, thank you so much for joining us.